Megatheropods were the biggest predators to ever walk on land in Earth's history. From their humble origins as medium-sized hunters in the Triassic, theropods developed into many different types of hunters and even herbivores, filling niches from bone-crushing giants to plant and fish-eating lake lovers. A megatheropod is defined here as an animal descended from the most recent common ancestor of Coelophysis and birds, whose adult body mass meets or exceeds 5,000 kilograms, or 5 metric tons. That's 11,000 pounds for my fellow Americans who don't know what the flip a kilometer is. And today we're going to discuss the ecology, biology, and evolution of the megatheropod kingdom, with each animal sorted into mass-based tiers because dinosaur nerds like me are suckers for that kind of thing. Whether you want fun facts to tell your friends or obsessively calculated mass estimates to repost on Discord, I've got you covered. What is a theropod dinosaur anyway? The quest for the first dinosaur we can confidently call a theropod is still undergoing, with many candidates either reclassified as related sauropodomorphs or regarded as possessing uncertain evolutionary positions. Eodromius is a strong contender for the first theropod at the moment and lived in the Ischigualasto Formation of Argentina about 231 million years ago. It possesses multiple characters thought to be unique to theropods, including a promaxillary fenestra, this little hole in the bone there, and the elongated shape of its caudal prezygoapophyses, bony projections on the front side of the vertebrae. Its identity as a theropod is challenged by multiple studies, however, so today we're going to focus on the neotheropods, animals that have clearly split off from their sauropodomorph cousins. They have 3 toes and a furcula, or wishbone. While bipedalism isn't unique to neotheropods, they are all bipedal as far as we know, and the vast majority were carnivorous as evidenced by their sharp, flesh-cutting teeth. Neotheropoda includes the following groups. Coelophysoidea, which includes tiny, light-skulled animals like Coelophysis and Procompsognathus. This is typically considered the most primitive clade within Neotheropoda. Dilophosauridae, another Triassic group, more derived than the Coelophysoids but more primitive than the theropods we'll discuss in a minute. Dilophosaurus and Cryolophosaurus are the 2 most famous members of this clade, and while not in megatheropod territory, were still huge compared to modern land predators. Dilophosaurus was about 7 meters long and weighed 400 kilograms, roughly grizzly bear-sized. Cryolophosaurus was slightly larger, at 7.7 meters and 780 kilograms, on par with unusually large polar bears. The rest of the theropods are in the group Everostra, or a clade that includes the most recent common ancestor of Ceratosaurus and Allosaurus and all of that ancestor's descendants. As you may have guessed, the first major group in this clade is Ceratosauria. Ceratosauria includes the ceratosaurids, like Ceratosaurus proper, an iconic crested carnivore from the Jurassic that reached over a ton in weight, and abelosauroids, which themselves include both the weird noosaurids like Machikosaurus and abelosaurids like Carnotaurus. Based on published information, there are no megatheropods within Ceratosauria, but we'll tackle the status quo in this video. Everostra is split into the Ceratosauria and the Tetanura, or the stiff-tailed theropod group that includes the vast majority of theropod species. Tetanura itself is incredibly diverse with over 12,000 species, so here's a very basic rundown. I know you're excited for the megatheropods themselves, but this section is important to understand the evolutionary context of each animal. Plus, you might learn something you think is cool. The Megalosauroidea is a tetanuran clade that includes the long-armed Piatniskisauridae, the namesake of which was about 4.3 meters long and 450 kilos as a subadult. Closely related to them are the Megalosauridae, like the iconic Megalosaurus, a 6 meters 700 kilo theropod that was the first non-avian dinosaur to receive a valid scientific name. Megalosauroidea also includes the Spinosauridae, which need no introduction. We'll talk about both megalosaurids and spinosaurids more in the video since they're the first groups to have proper megatheropods. Allosauroidea is next, and boy howdy is it diverse. We've got Metriacanthosaurs, known from the Jurassic and who may or may not have a supergiant theropod fragment from China, and Allosauria, a group with the most megatheropod species spread across allosaurids and Carcharodontosaurs. A significant number of the megatheropod taxa in this video are from Allosauria. The next most represented group is the Tyrannosauroidea, split into proceratosaurids like Guanlong, a crested wee lad from Jurassic China, along with the much larger Sinotyrannus and Eutyrannus. Megaraptorans, slender predators with long snouts and huge hand claws, were successful in Australia and South America. Maiit macrothorax represents the biggest well-known megaraptoran at about 3 tons and 9 meters long, the size of an Indian elephant. Tyrannosauridae proper rounds out the Tyrannosauroids, but I'm sure you knew that. Stay strong. Phylogeny is hard, but you're doing great. Almost there. The rest of the theropods are inside of the group Maniraptiforms. Ornithomimosaurs contain the Dinochirids, one of which will certainly be making an appearance in this video, and the Ornithomimids, which although not terribly large, were fast and successful. Alvarezsauroids include some of the most adorable tiny theropods you could ever imagine, like the cat-sized single-digited Mononychus. Therizinosaura included the plant-eating, scythe-clawed theropods, at least one of which was in Megatheropod territory. Oviraptorsauria was successful all over the world in the Cretaceous, famous for small theropods like Anzu and Oviraptor itself that thrived alongside much larger predators like T-Rex and Tarbosaurus. The biggest representative of the clade, Gigantoraptor, weighed nearly 3 tons and was likely the tallest theropod at the head when standing at its full height. Dromaeosauridae has no megatheropods, but that's probably a good thing. Informally known as raptors, dromaeosaurs include Velociraptor, Deinonychus, and Utahraptor, the largest of which was comparable to a polar bear. Utahraptor coexisted with a recently discovered giant Carcharodontosaurid that we'll be discussing in a few minutes. Troodontids were small, intelligent carnivores. The group's namesake, Troodon, is a dubious taxon, but better taxa like Sauroornithoides do exist. And finally, the most derived theropods of all, aves, birds. No birds have ever gotten close to megatheropod sizes, with the biggest birds in the fossil record only approaching a metric ton, but in terms of biodiversity, they outdo even extant mammals, with over 11,000 living species in this group alone. Now that you have the evolutionary context to understand which megatheropods belong to what groups, let's talk about the tier list. First, we'll be discussing honorable mentions. Animals that are either just short of the 5-ton minimum required to make it through the gate, or that are too fragmentary to confidently calculate their size. After that is the soldier tier. Theropod dinosaurs in the 5 to 7 ton range, using the largest available specimen of the taxon. Third is the artillery tier, theropods that max out between 7 and 9 tons. Finally, we'll cover the destroyer tier, theropods known from good remains that peak at above 9 metric tons. Each theropod will also be assigned a Jerry score, or how their mass compares to Jerry. Jerry has been a feature on the channel for years now and represents an average fully grown bull African bush elephant with a shoulder height of 3.2 meters and mass of 5,200 kilograms. He's even on t-shirts. You ready to get started, Jerry? I sure am. Oh yeah, we're also using Thor Odinson as our human for size comparisons because he's way cooler than a stock silhouette. Each megatheropod will also get a Thor score. For our purposes, we'll put MCU Thor to best guess 300 kilos based on his muscles being compared to metal fibers. Let's start the honorable mentions off with a Brazilian abelosaurid. URC R44 is a partial premaxilla that's similar to that of Pycnonemosaurus, currently the largest described abelosaurid taxon. It's terrible material, but it is big, and has been suggested to either represent its own species or a fully grown Pycnonemosaurus. While not quite Disney Carnotaurus size, scaling to a little over 10 meters long and 4+ tons, URC R44 is a great way to kick off the megatheropod list by highlighting less discussed taxa. Abelosaurids were a diverse and highly successful group of Cretaceous theropods with dense populations in South America, India, and Africa. They had tiny arms, much smaller even than those of Tyrannosaurs, with short pug-like skulls and sausage-shaped bodies, and are believed to have mainly hunted small and medium prey, given their relatively weak bites and small jaws. Keyword being relatively, they'd still be able to take down animals the size of horses or bison without too much difficulty. Chelantysaurus tashwikuensis is perhaps one of the most underrated large theropods out there. Its size alone, while impressive at 10 to 11 meters in length and approximately 4 metric tons, isn't the cool part. It's that Chelantysaurus, according to the most recent phylogenies, is likely a Megaraptoran that's slightly closer to Tyrannosaurids than Megaraptor is. It had powerful long legs and strong arms that ended in wicked claws any Spinosaurid would be jealous of. I desperately hope we can find a complete skeleton one day. Temeriraptor is next, at a respectable but not quite megatheropod level, 4,700 kilograms and 10.1 meters long. Its remains, originally referred to Carcharodontosaurus, were actually destroyed during World War II, but recently resurfaced photos allowed a team to describe this new genus in 2025. It's a large Carcharodontosaurid with evidence for a nasal horn, and its name means thief from the beloved land, referencing Egypt. It lived in the Baharia Formation of the late Cretaceous, and likely hunted young individuals of sauropods like Paralititan. The Cedar Mountain dragon is new, with its postcranial material having been made public in the November 2025 meeting of the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology. I was actually present for the discovery and excavation of one of its ribs by my friend Jacob Fruin, who's the lead author describing the animal. It's a basal Carcharodontosaurid, similar in morphology to Neovenator but the size of an elephant, that lived with Utahraptor. It may actually be the very first megacarch from the fossil record, dating to about 135 million years ago, only a few million years after the very first Carcharodontosaurid, Viteropristosaurus. This means that Carcharodontosaurids got big very early on in their evolution, an unusual trend. The Kenyan giant, affectionately dubbed Titanovenator by the paleo community, is the largest abelosaurid ever discovered. The only reason it's in the honorable mentions is that it hasn't been described, leaving us to piece it together from museum videos and skeletals. The known material places it as the largest predator in Maastrichtian Kenya, at 11 meters long and 5.7 metric tons. It's the first of the honorable mentions to be bigger than Jerry. When this creature is finally published, it will be a joyful day. I'm very interested to find out what its actual scientific name will be. Oxalaia is the phoenix of spinosaurids, as in its already fragmentary material was burned in the Brazilian National Museum fire of 2018. Fortunately, the material has been recovered, but it's not much. Just a piece of maxilla and chunk of premaxilla, barely enough to tell us it's a large spinosaurid. Brazil is becoming a hotbed for theropod paleontology, with more spinosaurids and carcharodontosaurids showing up in bits and pieces over the last decade or so. Hopefully that trend can give us some relatively complete specimens soon. El Tío is the name for the owner of two enormous Megaraptoran footprints from El Molino Formation of Cretaceous Bolivia. They're so large that before they were fully cleaned, a 2021 paper thought they were sauropod tracks. As a matter of fact, El Tío is responsible for creating the largest theropod tracks in the world. Any size estimate for an ichnotaxon is going to be very tentative, so I'm playing it as low as I feel I can honestly do with a 12.3 plus meter length and 7-ton mass. The nickname El Tío refers to the Bolivian lord of the underworld, who's seen as a patron and protector for miners and diggers. Bahariosaurus ingens is another destroyed African theropod, and one whose identity has been a point of contention for decades. Those who've studied the material in far more detail than I have argue for a Megaraptoran identity, which makes sense to me, although one analysis regarded it as a noasaurid. Bahariosaurus actually has the longest theropod dorsal vertebra in the fossil record, so even with the gracile, slender build of a Megaraptoran, it would have been huge. I place it in honorable mentions thanks to its uncertain identity and the fact the fossils are all destroyed. Sauroniops is terrible. Not because of the name. Eye of Sauron is a killer title for a big theropod and I love it, but because the material is so scrappy. The holotype is a single frontal bone, a fragment of the skull, although admittedly it's quite huge. Sauroniops may have been one of the biggest carnivores in Mesozoic Africa, period, comparing favorably to Carcharodontosaurus and Giganotosaurus in terms of what little overlapping material there is. The Kem formation must have been doing something right to support so many massive theropods. Gorthauer refers to a theropod, likely Carcharodontosaur femur fragment, also from the Kem formation. Public scans are available of the bone, actually, which allowed my team to measure it in painstaking detail. The preserved portion is 3% more robust than the same section in Giganotosaurus, indicating a rather large animal. Unfortunately, we can't say much more than that with any degree of confidence. Kemp's theropod might be the largest theropod of the Jurassic period, or it could be a sauropodomorph, given the stacked layers of uncertainty regarding the specimen's provenance and the stratigraphy of the area it was allegedly found in. It could be from the early Jurassic, a time period in which theropod and sauropodomorph material much more closely resembled one another. If it is a theropod, its size varies heavily depending on what Jurassic theropod you use to reconstruct it, all the way from 6 to over 10 metric tons. It's frankly a trash-tier specimen considering we don't know what it belonged to, but I thought I'd at least mention it. Shatun tyrannus, meaning angry bear tyrant, is known from the Udorchukan formation of late Cretaceous Russia. This informal name replaced the previous Reznia Drakon thanks to the efforts of the native Russian speakers who watched the channel, so thank you for helping me choose a more grammatically correct moniker. Multiple specimens are known, ranging in size from Nanotyrannus to Tarbosaurus to large T-Rex, but the remains are scrappy at best. The interesting part is that Shatun tyrannus lived with multiple genera of hadrosaurs as well as a sauropod, increasing our understanding of what large tyrannosaurs were hunting towards the close of the Mesozoic. Gomez is my arch-nemesis, a monster of my own publication, originally made as a video to point out how rivals to Tyrannosaurus usually have material that is just truly horrible. It persisted, however, given how the mid-caudal centrum Gomez is based on is genuinely enormous. It's probably a Carcharodontosaurid, although it might be Megaraptoran based on its proportions. Around 10 to 11 tons seems plausible for the animal, but its identity is highly unstable. Now we're onto the soldier tier, Megatheropods known from decent fossils whose largest specimens are in the 5 to 7 ton range. Torvosaurus tanneri starts us off, with a specimen known as Edmarca rex. That might end up becoming its own genus of megalosaurid at some point, but will regard it as T. tanneri until further evidence upsets the paradigm. Torvosaurus was the most powerful predator in the Morrison Formation, low-slung with long jaws and wicked strong arms. It hunted in wetland forests, likely taking down small sauropods and iguanodonts, and using its size to steal kills from Allosaurus or Ceratosaurus. Speaking of Allosaurus, the size of Allosaurus annex is very much up in the air right now. I was going to put it in honorable mentions at about 5 tons, but some of the people working on the Leviathan material asked me not to include it until scans are obtained. I'll keep you posted as always. Tarbosaurus was an elephant-sized tyrannosaur that pursued a generalist diet, hunting ankylosaurs, hadrosaurs, and sauropods within the Nemegt Formation of Cretaceous Mongolia. Quite a few Tarbosaurus specimens are known, but the holotype remains the largest verifiable individual at about 11 meters long and 5.4 tons. Multiple nearly complete skeletons give us an excellent understanding of the animal, including its growth and life history, something we don't even have for T-Rex now that Nanotyrannus has finally been recognized beyond reasonable doubt as its own genus. Young Tarbosaurus may have been nocturnal, based on their skull structures, which is nightmare fuel if you ask me. Suchomimus tenerensis was left off the previous edition of the Megatheropod roundup to my chagrin. It's an enormous spinosaurid, essentially the same size as Tarbosaurus that lived in early Cretaceous Africa. It possessed a long, cone-toothed skull perfect for snatching up slippery fish, while its claws were long and curved to help prey capture in watery environments. While it was no Spinosaurus, it did have a small sail of its own, perhaps used for communication with members of its own species. It would have stayed in the shallows to hunt, given how its light bones made diving beneath the surface quite difficult. Therizinosaurus cheloniformis is one of my wife's favorite dinosaurs ever, and it's easy to see why. It's basically a giant murder muppet. A likely herbivore, Therizinosaurus lived with Tarbosaurus, and probably used its huge claws as intimidation and display structures for both inter- and intraspecific communication. It's one of the tallest non-sauropod animals ever at the head, potentially looking down at you from 6 meters above the ground. Taurovenator is a very recent addition to the soldier tier, originally known only from an obscure post-orbital. In October 2024, a description of another, much more complete specimen from the same location in Argentina was published, indicating a 10.5 meter, 6-ton Carcharodontosaurid. Taurovenator, meaning bull hunter, was found in the Winkle Formation, the same group of strata that contains its close relatives Meraxes and Mapusaurus. The sheer diversity of megacarchs in Argentina, especially so close together in time, is staggering. Sometimes I wonder if we're oversplitting, but I'm no carch expert. Speaking of Meraxes, it's Meraxes. Described in 2022 from a skeleton that's actually pretty darn good, this 6.2-ton theropod is famous for both its Game of Thrones name and how old it was. Histological studies done on the bones demonstrated that it was at least in its late 30s at the time of death, and showed that it grew slowly for a long period of time to reach its impressive size. It also had long legs and a weirdly skinny tail, giving it a rodent-like appearance for a megatheropod. He needs some milk. Another specimen of Meraxes is currently undergoing description, and as of this video's recording is only known from an abstract. It includes material from the pectoral girdle, arm, and hind limb of another fully grown specimen, supposedly 15% larger than the holotype. Following isometric scaling would indicate that this Balerion specimen would be comfortably over 9 tons, but we're keeping it in the soldier tier for now because we don't know the actual measurements of the bones. Come back about this time next year and hopefully Balerion will have been published by then. It's entirely probable, if these initial reports are accurate, that Meraxes is in fact the biggest Carcharodontosaurid by a notable margin. Onto the artillery tier. Megatheropods that weigh between 7 and 9 tons at maximum known size. Acrocanthosaurus is my favorite animal within this tier. Hopefully you were able to celebrate Acrocanthosaurus Appreciation Day this past November 11th. It's the same day every year, so if you missed it this time, now you've got something to look forward to. Most acro specimens are in the 4 to 5 ton range, but Fran, by far the biggest, squeaks past 7 thanks to its thick tail and muscular ridgeback. Acrocanthosaurus features prominently in my book series Extinction actually, which you can check out using the link in the pinned comment. Acro has the widest range of any known megacarch, with remains from all over the continental United States. And it's just so aesthetic. Look at that beautiful animal. Tyrannotitan chupatensis, however, has got Acro beat when it comes to cool scientific names. It's hard to compete with Tyrant Titan after all. One specimen of Tyrannotitan is about the same length as Fran at 11.6 meters, but is slightly bulkier at 7.3 tons, a number that would make any modern land predators shiver. Histology demonstrates that this specimen was not quite fully grown either, so I wouldn't be surprised if skeletally mature adults were closer to 12 meters and 8 tons. It coexisted with Patagotitan, a 50 to 60 ton sauropod, and likely hunted juveniles of the species along with sick and injured individuals. Dinachirus is virtually identical in body mass but completely different in terms of ecology. Rather than being a flesh-eating hypercarnivore, Dinachirus chose the way of dietary peace. By that I mean it ate fish and plants, making it one of the biggest terrestrial omnivores in Earth's history. Don't make the mistake of assuming it would be chill to walk up to one, however. It coexisted with Tarbosaurus, and those claws were capable of dealing out significant damage in self-defense. Aggression may have been a key factor in its survival in such a dangerous environment. Mapusaurus rosier, unfortunately, is a bone bed taxon. That makes scaling its remains difficult, what with trying to determine what element belongs to what individual. The largest elements all arrive at an individual about the same size, about 12 meters long and nearly 8 tons. From a taphonomy and ecology perspective, however, a carnivore bone bed is fascinating, and perhaps hints at either mobbing behavior like Komodo dragons or some kind of cooperative hunting. Given how Mapusaurus lived alongside Argentinosaurus, the largest land animal we still have the bones of, some kind of pack hunting would have made a lot of sense. Even so, they were presumably still going after young and small individuals, given how a fully grown Argentinosaurus could push 80 to 90 tons. Even a pack of megacarcs would get swept away like chihuahuas trying to take down a hockey player. Carcharodontosaurus saharicus, now that all of its postcranial material got yoinked by Temeriraptor in early 2025, is not what it used to be. Officially known only from a partial skull that's slightly smaller than that of Giga, its other proportions are entirely unknown. Gorthaur might belong to it, but we really have no idea. It doesn't need to be complete to be cool, though. It's the OG giant North African Carcharodontosaur and is the namesake for the family with the most Megatheropods. That's awesome right there. Giganotosaurus carolinii is a beast, full stop. While the media's depiction of it as some Rex-killing supergiant isn't based on fossil evidence, it's still one of the world's most powerful apex predators, and would have been a capable sauropod hunter in an environment with Limaesaurus, Andosaurus, and the Candelaros monster, the last of which was comparable to Argentinosaurus in size. Giga's Chad chin is suggested to be an adaptation that allows its skull to withstand the high stresses of its fast bites, which would have been devastatingly effective against unarmored, slow sauropods close to its own size. The most recent reconstructions of the animal, based on 3D scans and photographs of the original material, put it between 7.8 and 8.6 tons. The infamous dentary specimen likely belonged to an animal of near identical size, given how it's longer but skinnier than the holotype's dentary. Giga being smaller than a Spinosaurid was not on my bingo card for 2025, but here we are. It may seem a little hypocritical to put the big North African Spinosaurian specimens in the artillery tier when they're known from skull and foot fragments, but the fact that we have 3 of them that all indicate animals of comparable size, plus the fact that they each absolutely dwarf the corresponding elements of the neotype, makes me keep them close to the top. Spinosaurus, for simplicity's sake, apparently maxed out at just under 15 meters long and between 7.8 and 9-ish tons, putting its ceiling higher than any described Carcharodontosaurid. It likely lived as a shoreline and shallow water predator, grappling and capturing gigantic fish and occasionally capturing terrestrial prey when the fancy took it. Its unique proportions, large dorsal sail, and paddle tail make it an iconic animal. This is my wife's current favorite, but don't tell Therizinosaurus. Tyrannosaurus macraensis only entered the arena in 2024, and is described from sparse remains. A partial skull, some teeth, and chevrons that had long been assigned to T-Rex. Re-examination of the material prompted the creation of a new species to account for its unique skull morphology. You all know I'm not the biggest fan of dentary scaling, but it's worth noting that all of the available material is comparable to T-Rex individuals like Stan, indicating a mass over 9 tons. I have T-Mac as smaller here to play it safe given how crappy the remains are, but 8 to 9 tons is still enormous. As a southern tyrannosaur, it may have encountered Alamosaurus, which brings all sorts of epic confrontations to the imagination. The destroyer tier gathers the elites, the kings among the kings. It seems appropriate somehow that the only remaining challenger to Rex's throne would be another Tyrannosaurian, that's Zhusheng Tyrannus magnus, which was first highlighted in the 2017 edition of this list as a dark horse pick for biggest theropod based on the Zhusheng dorsal vertebra highlighted by Tyrannosaur researcher Dave Hone. It's a huge vert, the second widest theropod vert ever measured actually, just behind the corresponding element in Su. But one bone isn't a ton to go on, especially with other Zhusheng specimens typically seeming to fall into the 5 to 6 ton range. However, there's actually quite a bit more gigantic material associated with the vert. I've been asked by the research team not to share too many specifics, but I have seen the material and can confirm that Zhusheng is not only large, but preserves quite a bit of the most important bones for determining body size. My personal estimate, not that of the team since that'll be included in the upcoming paper, is about 12.2 meters long and 9.5 tons, detailed reconstruction pending. I've been working with this team for a couple years now, and I'll make sure to provide updates as they see fit. You all knew it was coming. Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king itself, remains comfortably in first place for a number of reasons. One, it has far more specimens than any other megatheropod, giving it a large sampling bias in its favor. 2, many of its rivals were perceived as close to it in maximum size based on incorrect methodologies or creative measurement standards, and now that 3D scanning is starting to become more common, have been demonstrated to be notably smaller than originally reported. 3, Tyrannosaurus rex really is just that big. I remember 12 years ago when the internet thought that you needed to use giant, fully grown rex specimens like Su to outweigh Giganotosaurus. Now, with much more detailed measurements and reconstruction methods, we know that multiple rexes that aren't even fully grown, like the 9.8 to 10 ton Victoria and Devil Rex, dwarf most of the competition by themselves. To use the adult Rexes isn't quite fair at this point, with the biggest blowing past 11 and 12. Research is ongoing that indicates the very biggest Rex specimens like Sue may have exceeded 13, but I'll wait to cover that until the paper's out. The game has changed over the past few decades from what theropod can overthrow Rex to how many Carcs and Spinosaurids are bigger than Rex to which Tyrannosaurian will end up in second place. As a Tyrannosaur fan myself, I'm happy with current circumstances, but I'm not so naive as to think that we have a complete picture of the fossil record. If we do find a theropod that's definitively bigger than Rex, I hope I'll have the humility to shake its hand and hand it the trophy. Although, to be honest, we'd immediately uncover a T-Rex twice that size. It's becoming a law of nature. Thanks for watching! I aim to make a Megatheropod update once a year or so this one's a bit early, but so much has happened recently and my knowledge has increased so much since the last video that I just couldn't resist the itch. You can check out my book in the pinned comment like I mentioned earlier. Did I forget any Megatheropods? Are you upset about the progression of science and need to vent about how I'm spreading misinformation because it conflicts with your paradigm? Please comment. As always, you can join the channel at the Raptor level to receive loyalty badges and shoutouts at the end of every video, and members in the Megatheropod level get early access to videos on top of that. I'm the Vividen, and I'll see you the next time ancient Archosaurian carnivores break right through the ceiling of awesomeness.